evening, everyone. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting for the September 22nd, 2020. So the first thing in our agenda is to call the order to the meeting and to see we have quorum. Everyone is here? Randy?
Yes,
Gabriela?
Randy is here in chambers. Thank you.
Okay, so we have quorum. So next on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the September 8th, 2020 finance meeting. So do I have a motion?
Motion? Motion to approve?
Okay, any question, discussion? No? I don't need to vote. I always ask this question. Yeah, I need to vote, isn't it? No?
So you would vote, but you don't need a second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes for September 8th, say aye.
Aye.
Nay, the motion carried. Next on our agenda is public appearances for non-agenda items. Do we have anyone in the chamber?
No one in the chamber, Madam Chairman.
And Zoom? No? Okay. So no one. So let's move on. So next we have in our agenda the Finance Director reports, and the first item is the Treasury report. So Misty, all
So
yours.
the August Treasurer's Report was included in the packet. A couple of things to note there is our interest earnings are continuing to drop, especially as CDs mature and we're reinvesting them in the market. So that's not anything new, but that trend is continuing. And then the other thing that is somewhat new, the 2019 bond proceeds. So the debt that we issued in 2019 for a variety of projects, almost all of that is spent now, and I suspect in the next month or two it will all be spent. Big thing that tells me is that we really need to get moving on the 2020 debt issuance so that we can continue to have the cash in order to make the payments. So the fire station is completely spent. The McKee and the fish hatchery borrowing funds have all been completely spent. So you'll be seeing the 2020 debt issuance in the next couple of meetings coming through. So it starts with an initial resolution, basically you guys authorizing me to continue with the process. So that's all for the Treasurer's Report. I don't know if you have questions on anything.
I do have a question, Misty. This is Randy. On pages 6 and 7, I noticed that CDs that have matured, once they mature, where does the money go from there? Do you reinvest the monies, or do they go into a general fund? They're spent. Where do they go from there?
So it depends on the original source of the funding. So if it's borrowed money and a CD comes due, then most that would sit there or be spent on the expenses to pay for the capital project for which that money was borrowed. If it's part of our overall, I'd say, investment portfolio, then I would reinvest it either with another local bank if it's part of that kind of piece of our portfolio, or keep it within WISC, which does a bunch of different bids across the country for CDs. Generally, that money stays there, but reinvested with a different CD. We do have a couple of times where a local bank, we go out to quotes for a list of local banks that we don't have a CD with currently. So the money might get matured and go back into the general fund temporarily until we reinvest it in a new local bank.
And just a follow-up question to that is who makes the decision on which CD you're going to purchase? I mean, there's just such a huge array of, at least from my own experience, my own personal life of CDs. Is that decision made by you? Is it a committee, you and the mayor? How does that work? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. So the council has an adopted investment policy, which I will send out to all of you guys so you have it. Ultimately, that authority is invested with me.
Okay,
so
very good.
The local CDs, I have a staff person that does kind of the coordination, the calling around, getting the quotes, and we generally just go with whoever has the largest quote. For the WISC funding, there's an advisor that does all the quoting on that side. So they put together basically our ladder and say this is where our options are and get different quotes, and then I make the call on which bank we invest in.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So if I am looking at you have a list with all the CDs, so all the one that's a WISC, they are investment, and the other one in different banks that could be allocated to different projects.
So even the stuff that's listed as WISC is still in a variety of different banks. So WISC stands for the Wisconsin Investment Series Cooperative.
Yeah.
It's a service provider that's a consortium of Wisconsin municipalities that all work together through this TPA that we hired. So that's kind of the pool of funding, but there's an underlying bank that is connected to each one of those, and that's actually on a report, a page in here too, the next page, that's labeled WISC PMA investments. So those are the individual banks that are invested with WISC.
Okay. Okay, any other question for Misty?
Yeah, I have a few questions, if that's all right. I'm looking at page 31 of the packet and page 26 of the treasurer's report.
Can you say the title?
Law enforcement expenditures. And I was curious about the YMCA membership line item. It looks like we're not spending as much. I would assume that maybe that's suspended due to the pandemic. Is that true?
Partially true. It's also a benefit that we're required to provide to our officers under union contract, but not all of the officers elect for that benefit every year either. So it's kind of a mix of both of those.
So we budget for it, but we don't necessarily spend it if the officers don't choose to take advantage of it?
So we generally budget for however many people chose the year before, but as there's turnover and stuff like that, there may be somebody that falls off the list. But I can also say YMCA in particular was prorating some of their benefits over the summer because their gyms were closed.
So in the end, we do probably do we expect to make budget, or do you expect to be underneath that?
I'm not sure. I can look into that though.
I'm a little bit curious about that. And I have a couple other questions in relation to that. So the next one I'm looking at is page 34 of the agenda packet and page 29 of the treasurer's report. Down at the bottom under mass transit for Metro Transit Services. Are we expecting us to hit budget again that year? I know that there was some reduction in costs, or my understanding was there was some reduction in costs because of the pandemic, but is that not true?
There was some reduction in cost, especially with some CARES funding that was applied to the year, but we are still trying to figure out how to reach that budget number. So the amount that you see in there now, the 129,000, that's 1 quarter versus the 4 quarters in the year. Right now, the projection I saw when we were putting together the 2021 budget was 580,000, which is actually quite a bit more than what we have budgeted right now.
Okay.
So that's an ongoing problem.
And then the next page, and PT for under the senior citizens program, PT, part-time LTE seasonal wages. It looks like we're significantly under budget. Is that because we've eliminated some of those positions through the pandemic?
So not necessarily the positions, but most of what's included in there are the LTE staff for our fitness classes, and we haven't been holding the fitness classes. So you'll see, yes, we will be under budget in that expense line, but we're also significantly under budget on the revenue line, because the revenue that we collect from the seniors is how we pay for the expenses of those classes.
Okay. And then page 36, I noticed that the golf course maintenance under the Parks Department, it looks like it's over budget. Do you have any idea why, or is that something I should direct to Scott?
Which one was it?
I'm sorry, the golf course.
So this report is showing me the adopted budget. The council did approve a resolution to authorize the $50,000, and they did a budget amendment to account for it. I wonder if it's not coming through correctly. So the actual amount is $50,000 is what we're under contract for, and what the budget amendment was done for. But I'll look into that. It looks like
Oh, maybe you didn't update the budget amount.
and I thought this was amended budget, but maybe it's adopted budget. I'll have to look into that.
And then, I'm sorry, I'll let you take a note. I have another question though.
Sure.
And page 37 and 38, it's basically the same question as before. So there's part-time LTE seasonal employees for both rec and zoning and planning. And it looks like we're well under what's budgeted. And do we expect that we will stay under budget through the end of the year?
Yes, And those were, again, because of COVID. So on the recreation side, a lot of that is, again, programs. So we would pay for people to do the programs, which are not happening. So there's a reduction in the revenue. And then this was our way to help absorb that lost revenue. And then on the planning side, usually they would have an intern over the summer. But again, because of COVID, we chose not to fill that position to help absorb some of the losses we're taking.
So the revenue that we take in for those types of programs, those typically like offset the wages, like 1-to-1?
So it's an 80-20 generally for both the senior center programs and our rec programs. So we look at how much we collect, we subtract out any expenses we have, and then the city keeps 20% of that essentially as an administrative fee, and the 80% of it goes to the instructor.
Okay. And then, okay, so the revenue is actually producing the salary.
Yes.
We wouldn't issue the salary unless we bring the revenue in.
Exactly.
Okay, so basically we don't have this money in the budget because we're not bringing in the revenue. Is that true?
Exactly. And so if you look earlier on in the report, I can find which account number it is. It'd be a 46. So 100, it's on page 16 of the treasurer's report. Towards the end, there's a senior program fees line. So you can see we budgeted to get 45,000. We actually got 12,000. Okay. And then same for recreation fees. We budgeted 190 and we're at about 18. So that reduced revenue is driving the reduced costs and vice versa.
Really? Wow.
That really helps clarify. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
I do have another question, so unless...
Okay, Randy.
All right. I'm going to look at it on the big picture, Misty. I'm going back to what I like to call profit and loss, or capital to expenditures, but I guess revenue to expenditures. On page 9, I see capital at, let's say, a total of 87.7%, and then the bottom line is 58% for expenditures. And I know we're nearing the end of third quarter. To me, and correct me if I'm wrong, the city of Fitchburg looks like it's in, at least at this point, looks in a fairly good shape or on target. Do you see anything that could really disrupt that boat, at least from an expenditure side at this point, going into the fourth quarter?
So for 2020, a big thing to keep in mind as you're looking at it from a profit and loss perspective is that on the revenue side, the bulk of our revenue comes in at the beginning of the year. So It's hard to look at, say, we wouldn't have 75% of our revenue by the end of the third quarter, but we would have more or less 75% of our expenses in the third quarter. So you need to kind of adjust for that to an extent. The big thing I'm worried about from an expense perspective is that metro piece that Gabriella brought up before.
Right.
Most of our other expenses, we are covering either through the CARES funding that we got because of COVID, or we've made some of those other shifts, I will say, in our operations to try to reduce the impact to our expenditure budget because of the reduced revenues that we're expecting to see.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
So I have another question, Misty, in that same page, in the revenue section, the intergovernmental revenues, so they are almost $1 million, they are different. So are you thinking that we are gonna, get that different variance?
Yep, so most of that intergovernmental revenue, the biggest thing in there is the general transportation aid and some other shared revenues.
Okay.
Those amounts are set at the beginning of the year. So absent a budget repair bill or something like that being done at the state level, which is not expected at this point, we should be able to hit those revenue numbers for this year. Keep in mind, however, the revenue that we'll get for next year, and then even more so for 2022, might be affected because of COVID and the effect on that on the state budget. But for 2020, we are pretty stable.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, so thank you. We move to the next report. Is the COVID-19 financial impact report.
Yes, and so this one I would actually like to share my screen with.
Okay.
Lots of movement on this report lately. So updated the costs as far as the different programs that we've offered specifically to employees. So you can see some of those costs are increasing. Wanted to get down to the utility policy changes though. There's some new information in here now. So the PSC has extended that limit on disconnections through October 1st. So we obviously are complying with that. Another interesting thing is right about now is when we look at how much of the utility bill is going to get transferred onto the property tax bill in December. We're usually around like $75,000 at this point in the stage. We're at $110,000 at this point now. So my guess is a big piece of that is because of the limit on disconnections and then also people's inability to pay. So that's something that the utility has to watch. But the nice thing from a collection standpoint is once it's on the tax bill, then the utility is made whole and the city holds on to that debt.
Okay. So if someone is delinquent in the utility, it's gonna show up that delinquency amount in the real estate bill.
Correct, is a special charge in the bottom right
Yeah.
corner.
So what are the chances or the percentage of people paying that? Have you?
Almost always we get paid in full for that for
Okay.
a couple of different reasons. One is state statute requires that when somebody pays a property tax bill, the first thing that it pays off is the special charges and the special assessments. So that's the first money that's collected would go to pay off something like this. And then whatever balance is left would be the county's responsibility to collect on our behalf.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So there's a couple of them that we've had to continue on, but it's almost all of them are the utility gets paid through the property tax process.
So the assessments get paid through that process as well then? I actually didn't realize that. So any special assessment will be put onto the property tax bill?
Possibly, it depends on the situation. So there's some special assessments that are deferred until development or something like that happens. So those the city just holds until that trigger happens. Once the trigger happens, the property owner can choose to pay it in full, or they can, depending on the resolution, a lot of times they can choose to pay it over installments on the property tax bill.
Okay,
So it kind of depends.
got it.
Okay, I forgot. So you mentioned that I forgot those numbers. That how much is the amount that is delinquent already in utility?
So we are usually right around 75,000 at this point,
Yeah.
where we're sending out notices reminding people that they need to pay or else it shows up on the property tax bill. But we're actually at 110,000 right now. So 30% increase-ish.
And this is what we're talking about, the water. Because this
Correct.
one is,
Well, water, sewer, and stormwater.
yeah, I know, but everything coming the same bill, isn't it?
It's one utility bill, yes.
Yeah, okay. Wow, okay.
Included in the top of the next page is the interest and penalty waiver, and I reported this back to you guys, but wanted to point it out here for everyone else, is when we approved this delay, or I guess waiver of interest and penalty on the second installment of real estate taxes, the financial cost to the city was just that 1 month delay from when the county settled with us from August to September. And the county actually chose to settle with us in full as normal non-COVID years. So there was no financial cost to the city to waive that interest and penalty for that time. And for those of you that have not paid your second installment yet, October 1st is the day when interest and penalty will kick back in, which is coming up next week already. Also added another section about the business boost loans. So council obviously approved the guidelines and the amended guidelines as well, but wanted to get that in this report too, because it is an indirect cost of COVID. So the first round of reports, we issued 2 loans under this program. And then in September was another round and we issued 1 more loan. And then there'll be more coming on the 15th of each month through the end of the year. So I added that information in here. And then I updated this total cost to address emergency as a report date. So Gabriella, you pointed out my terminology was a little goofy, so I called it minimal instead of little. Thought that might be a little bit clearer. So the categories didn't necessarily change, but just the terminology did to be clear. And then the costs are updated based on what we've spent so far. So in total for COVID, we've spent $383,000 through August 31st.
Misty, do you remember when we approved in March the 250,000 emergency fund? Is this one is the three, that we already spent that amount of money?
Yep, that's part of it.
Okay.
But in the next section, we talked to you about the expected aid revenue. So that 250,000 contingency funding is not the only source of funding that the city has to pay for this 383,000.
Okay.
So while we're on there, the routes to recovery grant. So this is the CARES funding that went from the federal government to the state government, and the state is sharing some of it with us, $474,000. So as of the date of this report, when I was putting it together, in early September, the federal government issued new guidance that changed our perception on how things were going to have to happen. But today we found out that they have reversed that contradictory language. So this last paragraph in here is not applicable anymore. So we're able to go back to our old strategy. The city will be able to utilize that full $474,000 of funding that we're planning to get. We're using it mostly on, the sanitizer and some of the hard goods. And then we're using some for certain parts of our personnel cost as well, if it's eligible under the grant. And then this last week was actually the first reimbursement request that we submitted under this program, and then it was all fully approved. So we're doing that. And then there's one more reimbursement period in November. The Wisconsin Elections Commission CARES grant, so that is another $18,000 of CARES funding that was allocated to us specifically for elections purposes. Just added a little bit more detail in here about what that grant was and what the grant is allowed to be used for.
I have a question. You know that you sent an email that, and I saw it coming in the package too, an expense for $7,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we are paying those $7,000 from, what it was, postcard or
Is postage.
postage. So we are covering from this amount, 18,000, or is additional, or we already spent the money?
So the 18,000 had its first reporting period in September as well, September 15th. And at that point, we had spent the full amount of that money also. So some of those costs are able to go towards the $474,000 CARES piece. And then the rest of it is going to go towards the $250,000 contingency fund that you guys authorized. So just as a reminder, so postage is obviously much higher right now with the election. We have a significant increase in our absentee ballots, and each one of those absentees costs us $1.10 to mail out, and then we have to put postage on it to get it back. So having that pretty significant increase in the number of absentees is what caused that large increase in our postage.
We didn't, last year, when we prepared the 2020 budget, we allocate some amount, but we never anticipate this.
Yeah, exactly. So we knew that there would be more because there's always more turnout during a presidential election.
Yeah.
But just the sheer volume of absentee ballot versus the traditional in-person voting was unexpected and is completely due to COVID. So then the next section is the additional actions that would assist us financially if they're approved. The federal government is still talking about a possible fourth stimulus package. Again, I don't know that it's realistic to expect anything, but it is on the radar. And then these charts were just updated. So this shows each one of our categories of revenues within the general fund, and then what the susceptibility that revenue source is to COVID. So the property tax levy, which is the bulk of our general fund, is no impact really to COVID because it's a very stable funding source, and any bad debt is absorbed by the county and they continue to collect on it. And then that same report for all of the other funds within the city. So these are only updated based on new numbers through the date of the report. Do we have any COVID report questions before I go into the rest?
Gabriela has a question.
So going back to, I'm sorry, let me find the page. Page 43.
You know what page it is on the COVID report?
Oh, I'm sorry. On the COVID report, page 2. Under number 1, updated budget amendment for emergency-related expenses. I'm looking at that last item in the list, additional disinfection services. I recall that this is one of those items that was approved by the mayor through his emergency powers. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is that something that we are able to discuss as a council? Or is it really like not something that we're allowed to do given the, do we know if I guess the question is, can we have a discussion about that? And the reason I ask is that there's been a lot of evidence in scientific papers recently that COVID really isn't spread by surface contact, or fomites is the scientific term for it. So anyway, I'm just curious if we can have that conversation or if that's really up to the mayor completely.
So we've addressed that. So in the contract that was signed, there was a 45-day termination clause, which we have enacted now.
Oh,
so
great.
The cleaning contract will actually end somewhere around November 1st, depending on the specific day that notification went out to them. So this $6,000 for the additional service, which was from when the grant ended through the end of the year, that will not be incurred anymore. So all of the services that we're continuing to get is all grant funded.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and we
The
right
other one-
along those same lines, back when this was approved, as you know, research was quite a bit different at that point, and the city has done some other things in lieu of those cleaning services, which we wanted to share with our staff too, so that people felt comfortable. So we've purchased multiple foggers at this point. So we have, once or twice a week, staff is fogging the different areas, which is thought to be a better thing. And then we've also approved the HVAC upgrade that was installed at City Hall recently for an ionization system, which will hopefully better address COVID. And then there's one in the works for the library. And then in the future, there'll be that same system in the community center and the senior center.
Misty, so there is, in the same page going down, there is environment control, 49,000. It's additional disinfection services. So those one is gonna go up to December, isn't it?
Yes, so the budget amendment that was approved under that process was for the whole service period of time, from July to December.
Okay.
That was expected when the contract was signed.
Okay.
So there was that 45-day termination, which we've now implemented. So we're actually only expecting to pay for service from, I think it was the middle of July before they finally started, until November 1st.
Oh, okay. Any other question?
Thanks for all that information, Misty. I'm really glad to hear that those changes are being put in place to protect staff. So that's really awesome information. Thank you.
Yeah. So other than that, just more generic finance director report stuff. So the mayor's proposed 2021 budget was put out on the website yesterday. The meetings where the department heads come in to the finance committee to talk about their budgets is next week, Tuesday and Wednesday. This is technically a finance committee meeting. Only finance can vote on the resolution, but we strongly encourage all council members to come, similar to the CIP process, where it's a great chance to gather information and ask your questions. So make sure you have those on your calendar. Again, next week, Tuesday and Wednesday at 6 is when they start. And then I also want to throw out there too, and I'll say the same thing to council next week. If anybody wants to talk about kind of the logistics and the mechanics of how budget works, I'm more than happy to meet with you individually. Just let me know, and we can schedule up a Zoom call or something to go through that document and what to look for and where to look for the things you're trying to find. I know it's a very lengthy document with a lot of information to digest. I always encourage people to start with the mayor's letter to kind of get that really 10,000-foot view of his priorities that are included in the budget. And then each department has an executive summary that talks about accomplishments, initiatives, and then significant changes. So that would be the next thing to make sure that you read, preferably before the meetings next week, so you can be prepared with whatever questions you have.
And I would recommend, especially the new alders, that have that one-to-one meeting with Misty. I did it when it was my first year, and I did it with my second year. And I continue to do it. So, so you always learn something, okay? So, okay?
Absolutely, just let me know.
Okay, so next we're moving to the review of bills. So we need to review the detail of all check for $10,000 and above, dated September 1st to September 15, 2020, totaling $217,786 with 33 cents. Any question? I have a question, Misty. For the Goose Lake, study, that one is, we are going to split the bill with, that one is the town of Verona, isn't it? Oh, you are mute.
Mute.
Oh, Zoom. Yes, that is split 50-50 with the town of Verona.
And why do we have two invoices for the same amount?
It's not two invoices, it's the same invoice, but it's the split. So that top line is the piece that's the city piece, and the second line is the piece that goes to the town of Verona. The only difference you'll see is in the far right column, there's a GL account number 13. That's what tells me to bill it out to the town of Verona.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. Any question? So I have another question that brought my attention. So there was an overpayment on taxes for Sunshine Car Care. So do they overpay for so much?
So not exactly. So that one I believe is one where they paid us a check and then they also paid the county for a check. So we had to reimburse the duplicate payment.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. So we move to the detailed review of all check issue, check number 121169-1212110, dated September 1st to September 15th, totaling $279,330 with 26 cents. Any question? Okay, no question. So next we move to the detailed review of P-card transaction for $10,000 and above for the cycle ending August 6, 2020, total is $162,927 with 92 cents. Any question there? No? Okay. And next we move to the review of the P-card transaction for the cycle ending August 6, 2020, totaling $317,037 with 10 cents. Any question? No? Okay. So no questions. So then we move to the action items. So Gabriela, you need to.
Yeah, I move to postpone resolution R15420, engineering services for Cyan Road reconstruction, to the next finance committee meeting to allow for time for it to go through other commissions.
Second.
And Bill, is Bill still on the line, or is he? It was the next meeting, right? We are delaying it just to the next meeting? Okay, great.
October 13th.
Yes, okay. October 13th. Is that right? Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Nay. Motion carried. Next, I am looking for a motion to approve resolution R-156-20, authorizing the water utility to file a simplified rate increase application with the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin.
Motion to approve.
Okay, discussion. Bill? Or
Oh, I can do this one.
Okay.
Yep. So to back up for a second first, so our water utility is regulated by the Public Service Commission, the PSC. So anytime we want to do something with our rates, it needs to be approved by the PSC. So every year we look at our financials to determine if a rate increase is needed in order to meet the costs that were approved during the budget time. And then based on our actual experience from the year before and the audit that's done. So what we're bringing forward now is a 3% increase, which would be effective 1/1 of 21. It's called a simplified rate increase because it's a much easier process through the PSC. They simply look at your end of year financials to determine if you're eligible. And then if you are, they would authorize that 3% increase, which in our view keeps up with inflation more so than anything else. One of the big benefits of doing these simplified rate cases when we're eligible is that you're doing then smaller increases over time. At some point when your financials are completely out of whack, you have to do a full rate case through the PSC. And in those situations, you can see 20 to 50% increases, which is a lot to absorb in 1 year by our customers. So I really like the idea of staying on top of these smaller, more incremental increases as we go. If you look at the average home owner, this increase is $1.22 per quarter, or just shy of $5 a year. And then included in the packet is the actual form that we will fill out with the PSC, as well as the public hearing notice that we're required to publish in the paper, letting everybody know that we're pursuing this option. And in that public hearing notice, it shows what the different categories are, what the existing quarterly rate is, and what the revised quarterly rate would be if this 3% increase is approved. So it's a nice chart to see what the average by class impact is.
So my question, Mr. is this 3% is like, well, it's like every year we are going to have a 3% increase, or it's only for 2021?
This application is only for 2021. I mean, and going forward, but it would be a one-time 3% increase.
Okay.
Every time we want to do something different with the rates, we have to get permission.
And the 3% is coming from where? Is the city or the commission tell you this?
The PSD. So that's the amount that's allowed
Okay.
and or required under the
Okay.
application process.
And what is the Board of Public Works did? They approve this?
My understanding is that they approved it. Bill, I saw you just unmuted. Go ahead.
Yep, they approved unanimously.
Okay. My other question is, when you have the total, this is only the water, isn't it? We don't include here any investment in equipment or anything, isn't it? It's only...
So it does include investment in equipment from the water utilities perspective. So these rates would cover everything that the water utility pays for, but it does not include the sewer utility or the stormwater utility. Those rate changes would be done separately.
Okay. And how often do they increase those one?
So sewer rates, we increase every year based on what MMSD passes on to us. And then every 5 years or so, we do a rate study to make sure that the other costs are incorporated. I believe we did that effective 1/1/20. Yeah, just last year.
Yeah.
And then stormwater does a full rate case, again, more or less every 5 years. They also just went through one in the last year or so. Difference with stormwater, though, is the stormwater budget has been increasing quite significantly recently. So I think we are going to have to look at another rate increase more sooner rather than the 5 years from now. But right now this is just the water utility.
Okay. Any question? Okay, Gabriela.
If I recall correctly, we had quite a few capital improvements in the CIP that we just amended for the water utility, like a new water tower and maybe some new pumps that are coming down the line. Do you recall if that I assume that a lot of that would be paid for through the water utility, and so this is part of a process to make sure that the funding is in place for that when it comes down to it?
The shorter answer is yes. There's of course nuances to that too. So the water tower is paid a lot through the water impact fees, which are the fees we collect when development comes in. So it's the new development that has to pay for the new infrastructure on the water side. but the utility rates would have to pay for the maintenance of that stuff that was just put in, as well as the replacement in the future of those items. And so that's all factored into our rate case.
Thank you.
Any other question? Okay, all those in favor of resolution R-156-20, say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Okay, the motion carries. Okay. Next, I am looking for a resolution, motion to approve resolution R-166-20. It's a library tax exemption for 2021.
I move to approve resolution R-166-20.
Okay, Misty?
So this is, I'd call it a paperwork process that
Yeah.
we do every year. What this is we are telling Dane County that we have our own library and that we fund our library to the level that's required so that we don't have to participate in the Dane County's library system. So ultimately what this resolution is doing is it's exempting our property owners from the county's library tax. And we're allowed to do it because we fund our library to the required level.
Any question? All those in favor of resolution R-160-20, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, nays, the motion carried. Next, I am looking for a motion to approve resolution R-176-20, change of District 1 polling location. This is a direct referral.
Motion to approve.
Okay, so who's here? Okay, so what I want to mention, Misty, here in this one, I didn't see, I don't know, it was changed. I didn't see the language about the 2/3 of the budget amendment, but it's in the package in the council.
Okay, so I would respectfully ask you to amend the resolution then to include the budget amendment language as required and as shown in the council resolution. So Randy, it's your motion to approve. Do you accept that friendly amendment or could you make one?
I would accept the friendly amendment, if that's easier.
Okay.
Mike,
Okay, so,
thank you.
yeah? Okay, so, so my recommendation for this is let's discuss the finance part of this and let's keep all the other discussion for council.
I do have a question
Okay.
about the finance aspect. So my understanding is that Alder Maldonado arranged the League of Women Voters to pay for the postcard mailing to alert District 1 voters. How, Misty, could you give some insight into how that works? So, because we have a budget amendment that's required, but it may end up being a net zero cost to the city, given the fact that the mailing is going to be paid for by an external organization. But do we still have to have that? And then we get reimbursed essentially by League of Women Voters?
Exactly. So this is a city cost. We are required to send out those postcards, so we need to show the expense. And then the other half of that budget amendment is to show the donation from the League of Women Voters that will offset each other. So yes, it's a net zero cost to the city, but we still need to show that increased expense and the increased revenue.
Okay, so even with net zero expenses, it still requires a budget amendment with 2/3 vote.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Any other question?
Is it, I do have a question. Would it
Yeah.
not be customary to show that dollar figure somewhere, since we are the finance committee? Is that dollar provided anywhere, or?
Yeah, this is what the other thing that I want to mention, that in the council package, the amount is coming. Therefore be it resolved, that paragraph is different in the council package. We need to add that there.
Well, if I may, should we,
Oh.
I know Randy accepted that friendly amendment, but maybe we should read that out for the public so that everybody
Yeah.
knows. Do you have it in front of you?
What?
The budget amendment language in the resolution?
I can find it in the council. it read that section 10-47C, a 2/3 vote of the council is required when an amendment alters total revenue and expenditure of any particular fund. The budget amendment also requires publication.
And then can you read the resolution clause that was added by that amendment?
And then the resolution, it mentioned that one of the sections said, be it further resolved by the Fitchburg Common Council that it amends the 2020 general fund budget to reflect a $1,150 donation from the League of Women Voters to pay for the cost of printing and mailing postcards as required.
So Randy, that's the language we had you add with that friendly amendment.
And I accept.
Yeah, you don't have to say it.
Thank you, guys. Just want to be clear.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other discussion? Okay, so all those in favor of approving resolution R-17-20, say aye.
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 Aye. Nays? Okay, the motion carries. Okay. So next announcement. So the next meeting is, we know that Misty already mentioned that, but we had the budget presentation meetings are September 29 and September 30th at 6 o'clock. And then our regular meeting is gonna be October 13th. So, so we invite people if they want to, to participate or look online about this budget presentation. And I think we, as a finance committee, we have to be there. We don't have any other option. So, any other thing to announce? I don't know, Misty or no? Okay, so all those in favor of, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. We are adjourning at 6:20 p.m.